हाँ सर, सो अजय ने भी ज्वाइन कर लिया है एंड
हेलो सर।
तो राइट राइट तो लेट मी सॉर्ट ऑफ
आप
फर्स्ट
हो जाए
जी 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 So first of all, let me welcome Professor Rishikant Pandey ji to this meeting for the conduct of YBOSE of Ajay Jaiswal. And also let me express my thanks that he agreed to examine Ajay Jaiswal's thesis. And very timely, he returned back with his remarks, very important observations and remarks, and he kindly agreed to hold the Vivose at the soonest possible for the candidate. So yeah. So sir, like I mean, now I kind of I mean, handle the roll the dice to you. So please.
Thank you, Professor Verma ji. Uh, uh, Ajay, I have gone through your thesis. We know whatever you wrote in this thesis, and Professor Ajay Verma ji. But we would like to know, in brief, you try to present your thesis. That how many chapters and what you have done in this thesis.
Okay.
In very brief, within 15 minutes.
15 minutes, sir.
15 minutes or 20 minutes.
Okay,
but
sir.
not, it should not be too large.
Yes, sir. I get it, sir.
Actually, Professor Pandey, also has the head of the department over there, so he has a lot of administrative responsibilities. So he's already gone through your thesis, but you need to present the main points, like not taking more than 20 minutes.
सर भगत सर ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं, कनेक्शन में कुछ प्रॉब्लम.
All right, fine. So Professor Bhagat, our chairperson, there is some connectivity issue, so he'll be joining us soon.
So, shall I begin, sir?
I think that you should start your presentation.
Yeah, we should. Hello, Dr. Ajay, I'm here.
So Professor Bhagat, actually, I didn't unmute myself. So I've already welcomed Professor Rishikant Pandey to...
Hello, Professor Pandey ji.
Hello. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon.
So we are we are very thankful to Professor Pandey that despite his very busy schedule as the head of the department also, he gave us time at the soonest possible. And also he kindly had earlier agreed to...
Yeah, very kind of you, sir. Please.
So Ajay has already been asked by him to make his
ahead.
presentation and finish it and conclude it within 20 minutes maximum.
Okay. Respected teachers and professors and dear scholars, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm very happy to present the contents of my thesis before you. And so since I've been asked to present everything probably in less than 20 minutes, so I think I would like to focus more on why and how of what I have done, rather than giving an in-depth account of different chapters of my thesis. So is the PPT visible?
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So...
Yes, we can see.
Okay, sir. So I'll be focusing more, as I said, on how and why of my thesis rather than the in-depth account of my different chapters. Okay, so the title is a study of the principles of hermeneutics in Brahma Sutra Bhashyas, Samanvaya Adhyay, with reference to Shankar, Ramanuj, and Madhva. And the title itself is fairly long, so I think I shall begin by explicating the title itself. Okay. And the key word here in this title is hermeneutics. And this word can be understood broadly in two ways. One is textual hermeneutics, and then another is philosophical hermeneutics. And by textual, I mean the rules of interpretation of a text. And philosophical hermeneutics is the interpretation of interpretation itself, or more popularly, it is known as hermeneutic ontology. And it is in the first sense that I have used hermeneutics, and primarily I refer to the discipline of Purvamimamsa as Vakya Shastra here. And then the text under consideration is, of course, Brahma Sutra, and it's chapter 1, and its first 4 sutras. And the Bhashyakaras under consideration are that of Shankar, Ramanuj, and Madhva. And so basically, it's a study of. So what I tried to do to present a study of the principles of hermeneutics from Purvamimamsa perspective, and then it's also study of the principles, those principles at work in Uttarmimamsa Sutras. Or in other words, I have tried to understand Purvamimamsa through the lens of hermeneutics or textual hermeneutics more precisely. And then I have also tried to understand Uttarmimamsa through the lens of Purvamimamsa principles. So this is something about the title itself. And now I think I should say something about the exact literature gap which I am trying to address in my entire thesis. So there has to be a reason of each and every study. So I should focus on that first. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah. So why study Purvamimamsa to explain Vedanta Sutras? Or why this study is required in the very first place? So that's the moot question. So when we start reading any commentary on Brahma Sutra, there's one problem that we invariably encounter, and this has been relatively less addressed. So for instance, there is this book on Chatusutri by Pandit Hardat Sharma, and avowedly this is a book about Chatusutri, but while explaining each sutra, he has given, the author has given lengthy footnotes about Mimamsa rules of interpretation. And these footnotes are so long that they even cannot be called footnotes properly, because they run for 4 or 5 pages minimum. So this book is avowedly about Chatusutri, but interestingly, around 50% of the book is nothing but a summary of Mimamsa rules of interpretation. So why such lengthy digression in the very first place? And I think the reason is that these authors are very dimly aware of our recent readership in Mimamsa has focused more on the epistemological or metaphysical issues regarding the camps of Kumaril and Prabhakar. So Mimamsa as Vakya Shastra has something which has been overlooked. While this was not the case with some of the prominent 16th century introductory texts of Mimamsa, such as Arth Sangrah or Mimamsa Nyaya Prakash. So their exclusive focus was on to delineate or expound Mimamsa as textual hermeneutics rather than delving deep in their epistemological issues. So there's a complete mismatch between these two epochs, and that is why we have such lengthy digressions. Yeah. And then another egregious mistake would be to equate Mimamsa as the science of esoteric rituals. And once we accept that premise, then one could also say that since rituals are not necessary or they are no longer effective, and consequently, Mimamsa study is also not necessary. But indeed, this is all an example of a specious argument because the first premise is false, in my opinion. So, with that little insight, what do we get to know about the subject matter of Mimamsa? So, certainly it's not rituals, but it is the interpretation of sentences pertaining to rituals. And in fact, this ritual word itself is problematic. It aims to translate the Sanskrit word which is yag, and yag is in fact a complex process, and it doesn't refer to any one particular thing or event. It refers to a series of events, and any series of event which is philosophic or arthman, or it must lead to some purusharth in general. So it is something eudaimonic in nature. And then, what is the source of this yag? Certainly Shrutis. And then these Shrutis are apparently haphazard to any reader or uninitiated reader. And so, what Mimamsa is trying to do is to attempt to formulate a systematization of those Shrutis. And these Vedic injunctions or commandments regarding yag, they are to be interpreted in a certain way, and their shouldness should be identified, and various means to an end should be analyzed, and that is what we call as deontic analysis of those Shrutis. So again, Mimamsa aims to identify various elements of a prescribed action or yag. So it could include things like grammatical analysis of Shruti, hermeneutical analysis of Shruti, then identifying sub-steps or token actions of a larger action, then identifying means, different means to an end, and also identifying the krama of various means to an end. So this is what Mimamsa tries to do. And then in the discipline of Purvamimamsa, this takes the shape of Dharmayag, or it's concerned with worldly attainments, or which is more popularly known as Abhyuday. And in the tradition of Uttarmimamsa, this leads us to Brahmayag, which is about transcendental attainments, more popularly called Nishreyasam. Okay, so with this overview in mind, there are certain hypotheses or presuppositions that I put in the very beginning of my thesis. Number one, Purvamimamsa is something primarily hermeneutics or Vakya Shastra, and a prior in-depth acquaintance of Purvamimamsa principles considerably shapes our understanding of the Vedanta Sutra, number two. And number three is that Mimamsatva is something which is common to these both these traditions, be it Purvamimamsa or Uttarmimamsa. And number four is that both should be studied in proper sequence and they constitute one whole, in my opinion. So accordingly, I have designed chapters of my thesis in two parts. I just want to read out the titles of my chapters. So in the first part, we have 6 chapters, and these are all about Mimamsa rules of interpretation. Chapter 1 is Mimamsa as hermeneutics, and the second is an exploration of hermeneutical principles in Athato Dharma Jigyasa, which is the first sutra of Jaimini Sutra. And I could, based on my reading of Shrabar Bhashya, I could decipher these 10 or 11 rules of interpretation, which are like Lokarthvad, Vakta Tatparyavad, Artha Ekatwavad, and so on. But the point here is that if in just one sutra we have these 10 to 15 rules of interpretation, and we all know that this Jaimini Sutra does consist of more than 2500 sutras. So one can see the amount of work which is required to be done in this particular field. And from here, I took a detour because I could not explore all these different 2500 sutras. So what I did, I took recourse to Arth Sangrah, which is a popular introductory text on Mimamsa. And then in several chapters, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, I have tried to present the essential rules of interpretations or basic concepts and terminologies of Mimamsa, which we need to understand before we attempt to undertake any study of the Vedanta Sutra. So at the end of part 1 of my thesis, I have enlisted around 65 or 70 principles, hermeneutical principles, which I think are bare essentials if we want to gain some hermeneutical competency in terms of Vedanta Sutra. So given this, I turn to part 2 of my thesis. So in part 2, I have tried to show how those rules of interpretation are at work in different sutras of Brahma Sutras. Basically, I focused on the first 4 aphorisms of Brahma Sutra, which are Athato Brahma Jigyasa, Janmadhyasya Shastrayonitvat, and Tattu Samanvayat. And then all this is followed by a conclusion, which includes my findings and limitations. So this is an overview of the entire chapter or the scheme of chapterization. And I think now I should explain in detail at least one sutra here and I'll just try to illustrate what I have done in one sutra and how I have tried to understand the interpretations of different Bhashyakaras in the light of Mimamsa concepts and categories. So the sutra I choose is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Okay. Yeah. So this is the sutra Athato Brahma Jigyasa. It does consist of 4 words, in fact, Ath, Atah, Brahma, and Jigyasa. And the very first task which all these commentators undertake is to decode the vidhi in Athato Brahma Jigyasa. And what they are following is a principle of Mimamsa, which says Amnayase Kriyarthatvat Anarthake Tadarthanam. So this roughly says that whatever shrutis or sentences we have, they must lead its listener into engaging into some action. So in other words, they must prescribe us something, or by this Panini Sutra, which is Lingarthe late, all these descriptive sentences must be decoded in a prescriptive sense. So that is the first thing which all the Bhashyakaras undertake. Accordingly, they reformulate the sutras. So this Athato Brahma Jigyasa, and its literal translation is the inquiry begins, and it's certainly descriptive, but in the language of Mimamsa, this translates as Moksh Kamaha Brahma Bhavet. And this is a prescriptive translation to be noted, because in Bhavet we get the sense of bhavana and prescriptiveness, and by Moksh Kamaha all the adhikaratva has to be discerned, and then by Brahma we mean Brahma Yag precisely. And then Mimamsa would say that whenever any yag is to take place, we need to ascertain or determine or discern its antecedents and its process, its exact process, and then the consequent also. And this is what is reflected also in the different chapters of the Brahma Sutra, which are Samanvayadhyay, Sadhanadhyay, and Phaladhyay. And Mimamsa calls this entire discussion as Ang Angi Bhav Nishchay. So this is what all these Bhashyakaras are gonna try to achieve in their respective commentaries. Now, how to interpret this At? One or two, in fact, predominant principles, Mimamsa principles are at work here. One is this that of Vakyarth Pradhanta, which says that whenever any pad or the interpretation of any pad is taking place, it has to be done in the context of the entire sentence. So Vakyarth is given precedence over Padarth, or Vakya Samanvay has to be there. So this Arth has to be interpreted in accordance with other three words as well. And then second principle at work is that of Gaun Pradhan relationship, which says that whenever any word is whenever any sentence is to be interpreted, its principal words and its subsidiary words also need to be discerned. And Ath here becomes the principal word. So Ath is to be interpreted in accordance with the other words, not vice versa. Now, what are those for? There are some senses of Ath popularly available in Sanskrit language. And so these are four senses: Anantare, Adhikar, Mangal, and Pur Prakrit Apeksha. And the point is that whenever any Bhashyakar is accepting or rejecting any of this earth, he or she, the Bhashyakara, has to substantiate this with the help of any particular Mimamsa principle. So let us see how they have done it. So Adhikar, which means literally something which is begun. So this view is rejected because this doesn't find samanvay with other words like jigyasa and bhavayet. And the reason is that desire for or the inquiry is something which cannot be generated on volition. It's something which is born automatically. So there's this intuitive error there. So this Vakya Samanvay principle is at work here. Then Mangal as auspiciousness, that also has been rejected because this also doesn't find samanvay with other three words. Then one could also say that Mangal as auspiciousness can be taken merely on the basis of that it is Shruyaman or merely on the basis of hearing. This also is rejected because that would result in what Mimamsa call as the error of sentential spirit or Vakya Bhed. So that is why this earth is also rejected. Then Purva Prakrit Apeksha refers to the antecedents in general, or in fact all the preceding events of Brahma Jigyasa. But this is also rejected because Mimamsa is saying that whenever Adhikaratva of any yag is to be discerned, what we are seeking is we are seeking Vishesh Adhikaratva. We are not seeking Samanya Adhikaratva. And Purva Prakrit Apeksha is Samanya Adhikaratva. That is why this is also rejected by the Bhashyakaras. Then Anantare, which refers to the immediate antecedent of Brahma Jigyasa or Vishesh Adhikaratva, that is something which is to be accepted as the exact or final eligibility for this task. And what is that final eligibility? For Shankar, it is Sadhan Chatushte. We all know that. This is Vivek, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, and Mumuksha. And so, Shankar, after doing his very long exegesis or commentary on this particular sutra, arrives at one final sequence of this Brahmayag. And that sequence is the crux of his entire commentary. And he in fact suggests two alternatives. And alternative one is as follows. So it begins with Swadhyay and then Karmaubodhan, which is possible by the study of Purvamimamsa, and then respective Karmanushthan or the actual performance of those prescribed actions. And then once we perform those Karmanushthan, we have Karma Phal Anityata Bodh. And in fact, at the same time, we also have Brahma Phal Nityata Bodh. And this is something which leads to Vairagya. And then there is Brahma Jigyasa in the form of Shravan, Manan and Nididhyasan. And ultimately that leads to Brahma Atma Sakshatkar, and which is equivalent to Moksha in the words of Shankaracharya. So this is alternative one, which is a very long process. And then the adherents of Shankaracharya have also suggested alternative 2, in which this, if you can notice, this actual performance of those Karmanushthan can be bypassed. So the point is that just after Swadhyay of Vedic scriptures, one can immediately have Brahma Gyan Nityata Bodh. And this leads to something very instrumental and something very vital, which is Vairagya. So Vairagya becomes something which is unpredictable, and it's quite advantageous. It can arise at any point in time in a practitioner's life, and that certainly grants the eligibility for Brahma Jigyasa, and then the rest of the process is same. So this is the sequence suggested by Shankaracharya. Then Ramanuj also presents a particular sequence based on his own understanding, and he rejects the alternative 2, which was suggested by Shankar. And Ramanuj critiques Shankar's sequence on 2 points. One is that he accepts the necessity of Karmaubodhan and the performance of Karmanushthan. And then second, he also criticized the Shravan Manan Nididhyasan Vidhi of Shankar. So for Ramanuj, he cites Kathopanishad, which says that Nayamatma Pravachanin Labhyo Na Medhya Na Bahuna Shrutain. And then based on this Shruti, he says that mere Vakyarth cannot lead to Brahma Gyan, and something else is also needed. And what is that something else? Ramanuj calls that event as Dhruvanusmriti, which is also equivalent to Bhakti, or this is the mystical epiphany of Ishwar in some form. So this is the Shravan Manan Nididhyasan Vidhi, which he rejects. And again, in the language of Mimamsa, Ramanuj reformulates Athato Brahma Jigyasa as one is like Yagadi Anushthanen Dhruvanusmritim Bhaved. So it is by the constant performance of Nitya Ashram Vihit Karma that we can obtain the grace of Ishwar, which is Dhruvanusmriti, and then by Dhruvanusmriti one can engage in Brahma Jigyasa and Brahma Phal Prapti. So this is the what is the complete sequence according to Ramanuj? Again, this is Swadhyay, then Vakyarth Mimamsa, then Karma Phal Anityata Nishchay, and at the same time there is Brahma Gyan Phal Nityata Nishchay and Brahma Jigyasa and Shravan Manan Nididhyasan. And then Nitya Ashram Bhit Karmanushthan also need to be performed by the practitioner. And this is something which Ramanuj is again and again emphasizing, that this is something which cannot be bypassed at all. Then it leads to Brahma Gyan or Moksha or Phal Rupa Bhakti in his own words. Then Madhva also a little bit tweaks this entire sequence of Brahma Jigyasa, and he attaches excessive importance to this idea of Vishnu Bhakti or Vishnu Prasad. And in fact, he brings this idea to the very forefront by putting this in the very Adhikaratva itself. And for Madhva, Jeev is in fact Anu and Ishwar is Vibhu. And this Anu cannot grasp the Vibhu at all. So it is Vibhu which has to grasp the Anu. The vice versa is impossible. So like the finite cannot grasp the infinite. This is the central idea of Madhva sequence. Then to summarize the 3 approaches, I have coined certain terms which can beautifully capture their idea. So Shankar is suggesting a kind of Shiv-centric monergism, which relies on the sheer power of rational faculty through the process of Shravan, Manan and Nididhyasan. And in Ramanuj we have a sort of Shiv-Theo synergism, because he is saying that we need to perform the Karmanushthan as well and at the same time aspire for Ishwar Bhakti. But in the view of Madhva, there is this thing like theocentric monergism is there, because he is excessively relying on the idea of Vishnu Prasad. For him, Jeev is to be seen as in the terms of absolute Karpanyata. So this Brahma Gyan or Brahma Phal is the function, it's entirely the function of Vishnu. So there's nothing Anu Jeev can do there. So this is the way we can summarize their approaches. Also, we can say that Brahma Phal Prapti for Shankar is nothing Aparoksh Gyan or a form of noetic vision, and for Ramanuj it is also noetic vision, but the road to noetic vision goes from divine grace. So divine grace becomes sadhan and noetic vision becomes sadhya. But in Madhva, he reverses this position, and for him, noetic vision becomes the sadhan and divine grace becomes the sadhya. So these are the sharp and subtle distinctions, but they are really profound as well. So this is a summary of the first sutra, and it is essentially, it sets the roadmap to the entire Brahma Sutra, and one could easily see that there is heavy use of Mimamsa rules or concepts in the Brahma Sutra chapters, let alone this first sutra. And let me also say that the sole aim of the Bhashyakaras is to, first of all, in the very beginning, to make an exposition of the proper sequence. So in the first sutra, they have floated their respective pratikya vakya. And then in the remaining Brahma Sutra, they are going to vindicate or justify this particular sequence. So this proposed sequence becomes the foundation of the remaining exegesis of the entire Bhashyakaras. That is why this first sutra and the understanding of these Mimamsa rules becomes so instrumental or so essential. Okay, now some more findings, maybe I can highlight some of them very briefly. One thing I found that we should make this distinction between these two terms, Mimamsa and Samanvaya, and which many authors have failed to demarcate a proper distinction between these terms. So Samanvaya is an inherent property of Shrutis, and these Shrutis may appear ambiguous, so there might be apatah virodh, but internally or in reality they are coherent. And what is Mimamsa? So Mimamsa is our response to understand that Samanvaya. So it's a tool for discovering that Samanvaya. And then Shrutis are by nature terse and ambiguous because they aim at brevity, while Mimamsa seeks to remove this ambiguity by aiming at clarity. Again, it is our Mimamsa which must conform to Samanvaya, not vice versa. And in fact, the entire success of Brahma Jigyasa depends on how successfully we develop our Mimamsa so that it conforms with the Samanvaya. If it conforms absolutely, then it is bound to generate the effect of Brahma Bodh, otherwise not. So these two terms. And then something on the interrelation between Purvamimamsa and Uttarmimamsa. I propose that they constitute one whole, and this is highly probable that two texts, which are Jaimini Sutra and Brahma Sutra, they were one single composite text, but later on we divided them for the sake of understanding only. So these 12 chapters and 4 chapters of Jaimini Sutra, they focused on Karma and Upasana respectively, and the Brahma Sutra focused on Jnana. So they were, in my opinion, one composite text, not different ones. Then we could also develop the idea of Purvamimamsa as Pararth, because it is for the sake of something else. It is always directed towards something. So it must have some prayojan. They don't have, in fact, intrinsic value. And two great prayojan of Mimamsa is Dharmayat Purusharth and Brahmayat Purusharth. Then I've also said something about the Shankar's criticism of Purvamimamsa, and I was emphasizing on this point that we should properly understand Shankar's criticism of Purvamimamsa. Otherwise, we come to some unwelcome conclusions which we don't want. So Shankar was trying to criticize a part of Mimamsa system which was regarding the phal anityata of certain dharmayag. And he was not criticizing Mimamsa as a whole or as a Vakya Shastra. And in fact, if we extend this attribute of part to this whole, then certainly it would be an error of committing this fallacy of composition. So what Shankar was trying to criticize was that this Mimamsa should not be applied just for the sake of Abhyuday. The highest possible application of Mimamsa could be and should be, in the opinion of Shankar, be done in the realm of theological pursuits or Brahma Jigyasa. So that was the exact criticism of Shankar, which has been often misinterpreted. Then I could also figure out something problematic with this, the idea of sutra itself. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to reconsider our understanding of the nature and function of sutra. So there's this particular shlok or classical formulation of the idea of sutra that we have in our tradition, which says that it should be alpakshar, asandigdham, sarvat vishrutomukham, astobham, anavadyam ch sutram, all these things. So alpaksharam is fine because sutra aims at brevity or conciseness. Sarvat vishrutomukham is also fine because it seeks to expound essence or the universal nature or the ideas. Astobham anavadyam, which is about the absence of literary process, that is also praiseworthy. But there is something problematic with this asandigdham, because it says that the sutra is unambiguous, and while this is not the case, so we need to reconsider our understanding of this, the nature of the sutra. And if the sutras were prima facie asandigdh, then there was no need of the bhashyakaras to give their respective commentaries. So this is another literature gap which I could discern, that there is very dearth of a scholarship which seeks to explain the exact nature or philosophical function of sutras. So something in this field also can be certainly done. Then two inquiries also I came across while I read different theses or papers or books, and several authors have tried to attempt to answer these two questions, which in my opinion are in a way redundant. So one is to ask what were the original views or the view of the Sutrakara, I mean Badara and Vyas. Now this is something that we cannot know. Why? Two reasons are there. One is that because we don't have other available texts or commentaries of Badarayan. And we have already seen that sutras per se are highly cryptic and they cannot be interpreted all. So the idea is that the original view of Sutrakara is something which we cannot know unless we have the explanation in the words of the Sutrakara himself. Then the second interrelated inquiry, which has been the basis of so many research papers and theses and books, like they want to ask whose interpretation, which Bhasyakara's interpretation is more faithful to the view of the Sutrakara. Again, we cannot know this because the original view of the Sutrakara is not available, and so this is also something which becomes superfluous or redundant. So at best what we can do, we may compare the Bhasyakaras among themselves, but we cannot compare the Bhasyakaras with the original view of the Sutrakaras. This cannot be done unless we have some more concrete evidence in the terms of available works of Badara and Vyas. Okay. And something about Brahman's Anirvachanita also we said.
I would like to interfere because I have another meeting at 2 p.m.
Okay, sir.
It is quite enough. Your presentation is very nice and you have brilliantly presented your paper and thesis
Okay, sir.
in very nice way.
Okay, sir. May I conclude in 1 minute?
Okay.
Okay, sure, sir. So I have also expounded the idea of Brahman as Bhuma, and I have compared this with the idea of scent and Salam as a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. And this is what is highlighted in the two other sutras of Brahma Sutra, which is Janmadhyata and Shastriyonitvat. Then Brahman also I have tried to understand through the distinction of Bhu and Bhavya. And here I have tried to compare uh, Nirgun Brahma with Aristotle's idea of actus purus or pure actuality. This is I can bypass. And then these final suggestions are there, which are based on my research. Like any introductory text on Indian philosophy should give ample space to understand Mimamsa's Vakya Shastra in addition to various epistemological issues. Then, number two, any serious study of Vedanta Sutras must be accompanied by a manual of Mimamsa concepts and terminologies. And then Mimamsa could also be presented as a science of sentence. So, in fact, there are three allied disciplines which are Pad, Vakya, and Praman. And in fact, if we ask a Mimamsak what is a good philosophy, then perhaps the answer would be a good philosophy is good grammar, good sentencing, and good reasoning. So these all constitute the three important pillars of Mimamsa. Then lastly, I would like to conclude by pointing out some limitations of my work. Like one obvious limitation of my work was that I focused only on the Chatusutri, while my initial plan was to explain all the 104 sutras of Samanvaya Adhyaya. So this was a bit over ambitious exercise and I could not do that. And then I explored only one sutra of Jaimini and I only explored Arth Sangraha. Another fascinating introductory text is there, which is Mimamsa Nyaya Prakash. If I'm given a second chance, definitely I would go with that. So just to conclude, basically what I have done, I have just tried to give an illustration of a particular methodology. And I expect the reader to engage or to apply this methodology in other sutras as well. So he's expected to know this, like from one, he's expected to know the all. So that is what I try to do. Okay, so this is what I could do and also what I could not do. And again, sir, thank you for this patient listening. And I must extend my gratitude to you, sir, Professor Rishikant Pandey, sir, because whatever little I know today is because of you. Like you taught me the basics of philosophy, and I'm very fortunate to say something before you. So over to you, sir. And sorry if I'm late in my presentation.
Thank you, Ajay, for your nice presentation. Uh, you have done excellent work, naturally. There is no doubt.
Thank you, sir.
At the level of content and expression both. However, I would like to know some applied questions
Okay, sir.
indirectly related to your thesis.
Okay, sir.
Number one, why did you choose this topic for your research?
Sorry, sir. Could you please repeat?
Why you have chosen this topic for research?
Yeah. Okay.
Not also some other topics like applied ethics and philosophy of language in Western philosophy.
Yeah.
You opt this topic for your research.
Okay. Sir, from the very beginning, I have been deeply interested in Vedant, and especially this is out of my personal interest that I wanted to do something in Vedant or especially Brahma Sutra. Then, in fact, when I started reading about Brahma Sutra, initially when I started reading the original Bhashyas, I did not understand them at all. Even I knew the basic Sanskrit, but I didn't have any idea of the Mimamsa concepts and terminologies. So then I was suggested that I should pursue my personal interest, but to make some contribution in the general field, I should do it through the lens of Purnimasa. So that was my intention and my instigation and prerna as well.
Okay.
But at the same time, I really appreciate the philosophy of language and hermeneutics, and all these I could very well find in the tradition of Mimamsa itself. So it's like a complete package. We get to know something about philosophy of language, philosophy of action, and also about theology, and ethics is also there. So although this is what apparently looks like, but in the garb of this broad field, I have explored other dimensions as well. So I'm really happy with that. In fact,
Okay. Another thing is, I would not like to ask that whose interpretation is best interpretation, because you have already.
yes,
And this sloka, Shankar's interpretation is different from Ramanuja's interpretation. According to Shankaracharya, it means that only Brahman is real.
hmm
To Brahman, nothing is real. This is the basic point of view. Because Brahma Ginnam Sarvam Mithya Brahma Ginnam Tvat Suti Rajatva. That is, except Brahman, everything is unreal. But the same sutras
hmm
was interpreted by Ramanuj in different manner.
yeah,
Ramanuj. It does not mean that only Brahman is real and except Brahman everything is unreal.
yeah,
But it means that Brahman is the locus.
yeah.
It has two other properties, Chit and Achita.
Of course, sir.
Chit and Achita, you can't say that Chit and Achita are illusion,
hmm
but they have also existence. But their existence depend upon Brahman.
hmm
So, they propounded Vishishtatvaita.
hmm
Also, you can't say that interpretations are more or less similar to each other and there are no differences among interpretations of different thinkers. How can you explain it? Eko Brahma Dutiyo Nasti. What are the interpretation of Ramanuj? And what is the interpretation of Shankaracharya according to you?
Sir, for instance, Shankar would explain this Eko Brahma Dutiyo Nasti in the sense of absolute Brahman only, or Nirgun Brahman. So for him, Brahman is something asanskarya, or any act or any kriya cannot be performed on that. So Brahman is something like it doesn't have any potentiality. We cannot do anything about that. This is the point which he has been trying to prove again and again in his Bhashya on Brahma Sutra, that he is not the object of kriya. Any kriya, even Gyan kriya cannot happen on that. It is so Shankar is very radical in nature in the sense that he is saying that if your mind is sharp and if it has sufficient amount of vairagya, then merely on the account of hearing this Mahavakya, that Tattvamasi, you can be liberated on the spot. This is the radical methodology of Shankar. And in fact, all these Bhashyakaras, we can divide them into just two camps, Shankar and non-Shankarites. That's it. All the non-Shankarites, their emphasis is that Brahman is cannot true, that Shankar is saying that Brahman cannot become the object of any action, but there is one action of which he is the karma, and that karma is upasana. So Brahman is the object of upasana, and nobody can get liberated by hearing to the mere vakyarth. If this was the case, then everybody would have been liberated. That is the point of Shankar, Ramanuj, and Madhva. And Madhva takes this to an extreme. He says that Jiva is completely Karpanya and Anu. He cannot do anything. So this Brahma Jigyasa or Brahma Fal Prapti is completely the function of Vishnu Prasad, nothing else. So this is how their emphasis is.
Okay. One thing I would like to also know from you,
Okay, sir.
I'd like to know what is your opinion regarding it. In
Okay.
the text, philosophers, especially Wittgenstein and onward,
Mm-hmm.
philosophers generally accept that
Mm-hmm.
no literal meaning of a word.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning of word
Mm-hmm.
derives from its
Sure,
applications
sir.
uses, and therefore Wittgenstein suggests that don't ask for the meaning,
Mm-hmm.
its applications.
Ask for the use.
Yeah. What is your interpretation? What is your view regarding this contextually? Because whatever I understand in your thesis, you try to interpret everything from its literal meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It was the missing point, in my opinion, or whenever you are going to publish your book, then
Mm-hmm.
you should also consider this thing that is interpretation possible?
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you. Only literal meaning is not
Sure, sir.
sufficient. We should also ponder over upon
Yes,
contextual
sir.
meaning also. So, come through this thing in your topic, in your research work, that how can you interpret the contextual meaning of your different sutras?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, literal meaning is okay, there is no problem.
Mm-hmm.
The contextual meaning
Mm-hmm.
in the text of the sutra, do
Mm-hmm.
you think
So there was some voice break, but am I audible, sir?
okay, you are audible?
Yes, sir.
Uh, my suggestion is
Okay, sir.
whenever you are going to present, publish your work,
Mm-hmm.
then you should also comprehend
Mm-hmm.
and try recently so that your thesis will be more pertinent, more relevant. It seems that I am not audible.
So partly your voice is breaking, but I'm trying to getting the sense. I'm getting the sense of what you are trying to say, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Whatever I could understand, like you were trying to say that apart from the literal meaning, we should also put some emphasis on the contextual meaning as well. Right, sir? Yeah, so in fact, this is a very pertinent issue. This has been taken up by, in fact, Shabar himself. And he says that prima facie, in the first go, we should accept the literal meaning or abhidha. But in case abhidha is not giving us cogent explanation, then we can forsake that, and abhidha needs to be abandoned if it is not making sense at all. So he is certainly of this opinion that in one go you should accept abhidha, but if abhidha is not playing any role, then it should be discarded. So, and in fact, sir, this has been done in the Brahma Sutra 2 and 3 as well. Because Brahma Sutra 2 and 3, they are the literal descriptions of Brahman, like Janmadhyasya and Shastrayonitvat. But these commentators are saying that these are not simply the descriptions of God, Brahman. They are asking us to engage, or they are inviting us that they should be interpreted in a theological sense. We need to contemplate on the uh, bhumaness or vastness of this idea. So a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. So we should engage in that action. That is the meaning, exact meaning of these literal sentences. So like जब कहते हैं कि ब्रह्म इज आनंदमय, तो ब्रह्म का डिस्क्रिप्शन नहीं दिया जा रहा। जिज्ञासु को ये कहा जा रहा है कि आप ब्रह्म पे प्रवृत्त हो जाइए। So it is not what would the benefit by giving the description of Brahman? So there is no use of giving descriptive sentences. Mimamsa is again and again saying that most probably all the sentences should be transformed or decoded in their prescriptive sense. So yes, sir, I certainly agree with your point, and I would reflect more on that.
What I would like to know, because you have done excellent work. This
Thank you,
is
sir.
research, in my opinion.
Thank you, sir.
And then I ask many questions to you, but don't worry. You also mentioned that Brahman may construe two levels. About Brahman and
Sorry, sir, could you please repeat?
page number 248 or somewhere.
I remember, sir.
Yeah. So how can you differentiate between knowledge about Brahman and knowing?
Exactly, sir. Sir, the entire heading, if I can recollect, is that I have tried to say that this task of knowing Brahman is really difficult in the very first place. It's mysterium tremendum, and this task is bifurcated in two ways. So one is to know about the Brahman, so which is to know the exact qualities or attributes of Brahman, like Chit and Achit, or Madhva says that Sarvagun Vachyatva. So this is one level of understanding, which comes from Shravan and Manan. So this is knowing about Brahman, and then ultimately this leads to knowing Brahman directly, in the sense of that, in the words of Shankar, when this knowledge takes place, when this distinction of object and subject disappears. So like when Brahmakar Vritti is extended for a very long time, then this takes the shape of very Brahma itself. That's the idea there. And my overall contextual meaning was that both these tasks are really difficult. Yeah. So
They all are very difficult, but one should try to also remember from Sharirak Bhashya, Brahma Brahmaiva Bhakti. Brahmavid Bhakti.
Exactly. That is the second. Knowing Brahman directly, that is the second way. Yeah.
So, like in Ramcharitmanas, सोई जान नहीं जे देहु जनाई, जानत नहीं तुम्हें कोई जाए.
Exactly.
Sharirak Bhashya, Shankaracharya or some other authors mention that Atma Atmanam Janati.
Yeah.
That all kinds of dichotomy are few at the level of realization.
Exactly, sir.
How can you differentiate between knowledge about Brahman and knowing Brahman? Because there is no, this knowledge is not considered upon tripartite conditions of Plato, like truth, belief, and justification.
Yes, sir.
Because knower and known both became identical to each other at the time of realization. So, what do you mean by knowledge about Brahman?
So that is Shabd Gyan. That is Shabd Gyan about Brahman. Knowledge about Brahman is Shabd Gyan about Brahman, and knowing Shabd Gyan, like knowing about the qualities of Brahman merely on the basis of scriptures.
Okay.
That is knowing about Brahman. So there remains a certain distance. And then knowing Brahman is when we directly know, and when this distinction of I and thou disappears, that is knowing Brahman directly. So in the second one, I'm fusing this tripartite distinction, and in the first one, it's just a scholastic understanding of Brahman. That is what I want to say.
But you should have to mention it also.
Okay.
that this is for scholars and this is for the person.
Exactly, sir. It's the same thing.
That
So
there
one
is
is
no.
one in Sanskrit. This is called one is Shabd Gyan and another is Aparoksh Gyan.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you. Personally, I may congratulate you as a doctor of philosophy, but I would like to ask other scholars if they have any problem, any queries, then they can ask question to Ajay Kumar.
Sure, sir. I'm open to questions and suggestions and any remarks, if any.
So thank you, Ajay Kumar.
Actually, our university, is going through vacations, so most of the students actually are gone back to their respective places, but online they could have kind of attended. Professor Bhagat is also there. Professor Bhagat, would you have any comments to make? He may have gotten into.
I think that this is quite enough, and Ajay Kumar presented
So,
and tried to reply to all these questions beautifully, whatever asked by me.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I
So,
owe everything to you. It is just your teachings are being displayed to you only. There is nothing additional.
so if you allow me, Professor Ajay ji, most probably sir is not present.
yeah. So, let me formally thank you once again for sparing your, sparing time for us from your very busy schedule, and and conducting the Vivosi for Ajay. So,
I think, sir,
Professor Bhagat is
back.
Yeah. So, Professor Bhagat, you have any
I'm perfectly fine. He has done a good work, and I enjoyed the discussion also. I was signing some paper in between. So this is the plight of a chairperson, sir. है ना आपको भी पता है. I mean, you can't do the academic fully. कहीं ना कहीं. Yeah. So I'm very happy to know that you have also taught Ajay, and he has done very good work.
Yes, we have
Thank you,
done.
sir.
For Ajay, formally, I congratulate you,
Thank
both
you, sir.
you and your supervisor, Professor Ajay Kumar ji.
Yes.
Excellent work. Again, thank you all, even Professor Bhagat ji, who is chairperson of the department, and all of the audience who are present over here. We would like to congratulate Ajay Kumar ji as Dr. Ajay Kumar. Now you became Dr. Ajay Kumar.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I've been very patiently waiting for this Viva. I think, sir,
So,
I'm patient
Dr.
now.
Verma can do the formalities, no? He will be sending to Professor Pandey some paper to be signed for this interview.
Right.
Unless
I'll
that
do it.
signature,
I'll do it very shortly.
that we cannot pursue further.
Absolutely. So I'll do it in just a few minutes from now.
Okay, great.
I've sort of filled up Professor Pandey's name and everything, and sort of he could fill up the rest. And
Yeah.
sort of so I'm going to send him the report pro forma in just a few minutes. So actually,
Thank
JQ has a
you
very
so much, Professor
simplistic pro forma.
Pandey.
Yeah. So let me again, once again, thank Professor Pandey.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, congratulations,
Thank you,
Ajay.
sir.
All the best.
Thank you, sir.
All the best. All the best.
Okay,
And
thank
namaste to Pandey, sir. Namaste, sir.
you. Namaskar, namaskar.